He parked his cherry red 1969 Camaro Z28 under the neon glow of the gold and silver pawn shop's marquee, heart pounding like a revving engine. This wasn't another day of haggling over antique pocket watches or rare coins. Tonight, he would do something no one in Las Vegas or on national television ever imagined. He would auction off every single car in his prized collection. The man who built an empire trading relics of the past now faced an auction block that could change everything. Rick Harrison, co-owner of the world's most famous pawn shop, grew up in an environment far removed from muscle cars and chrome wheels. Born in Lexington, North Carolina, Rick learned the value of hard work from his single mother, a dedicated nurse who scrimped and saved to give her boys a shot at the American dream. When his family moved to Las Vegas in the late 1970s, Rick's world became neon lights, slot machines, and the gritty reality of a city in flux. He found his calling amidst dusty shelves of gold chains and vintage typewriters, haggling with tourists who hoped to transform their junk into instant cash. From those modest beginnings, he and his father built an institution. But beyond the storefront safe, filled with gold bars and rare coins, Rick harbored another passion: cars. He saw each vehicle as a rolling piece of history. Every straight-axle Ford, every classic Mustang or Corvette whispered stories of freedom and rebellion. He would spend weekends cruising back roads, hunting for barn finds or striking deals at local auctions. Over the years, his private garage blossomed into a small museum. A cherry Camaro, a patina-perfect '55 Chevy Bel Air, a black '71 Dodge Charger, even a rare 1963 Corvette split-window coupe. He shared some of them on Pawn Star specials, but most remained tucked away until now. Whispers of trouble began months ago when rumors swirled that the IRS had placed a lien on Rick's properties. Creditor notices and legal papers arrived in unmarked envelopes, carried by process servers in crisp suits. He paid some bills, others he challenged in court. Yet the mounting costs of a sprawling empire, millions in insurance premiums, maintenance for each high-performance engine, and property taxes on more than a dozen commercial lots, strained his cash flow. Behind the scenes, bank managers watched his accounts with hawk-like scrutiny. Colleagues who once toasted his success now murmured about risk and overextension. Last week, Rick convened an emergency meeting in the back office, where fluorescent lights hummed above piles of paperwork. He pushed polished rims aside to reveal stacks of auction catalogs. Cameras rolled, even though filming this moment felt unthinkable. In hushed tones, he announced the unthinkable: "We're going to list every car. Starting at next month's big auction, these vehicles are going under the hammer." Shock ricocheted through the room. Corey, his son and business partner, stared blankly at the floor. Chumley's jaw hung open. The saga that propelled Pawn Stars to hundreds of millions of viewers would pivot to a story of near ruin and redemption. What drove Rick to this point? Some insiders chalk it up to overspending on a dream. Others blame a failed side venture, a boutique casino that never launched, a digital pawn app that drained investment dollars. Industry insiders whisper of lawsuits from disgruntled investors, of legal fees that skyrocketed after a high-profile dispute over a rare sports car misdescription. The media speculated about divorce settlements or lavish alimony payouts. None of it explained the emotional gut punch of losing a childhood Corvette, the one his mother helped him find at a southern swap meet. The one he used to impress customers with a roar of horsepower and a flash of gleaming paint. For fans, this auction is more than a sale. It's a window into a legacy at stake. Will Rick marshal a last-minute rescue? Will a deep-pocketed buddy step in to save his prize charger? Or will these cars roll away to the highest bidders, leaving behind empty garage bays and a void in the Pawn Stars narrative? The world will be watching, from online live streams to late-night talk shows dissecting every lot number and hammer price. FOMO is real. Auto collectors are already registering accounts on the auction site, drooling at the prospect of owning a piece of Harrison history. But beyond the bidding war and the dollar signs lies something deeper. This auction forces Rick to reckon with what he values most: the roar of an engine or the security of a stable business, the pride of ownership or the humility of sacrifice. It challenges viewers to ask themselves, what would you do if you had to liquidate your lifelong passion? Which possessions define you, and which are just shiny objects in a world gone mad for instant profit? In the coming episodes, you'll see the heartbreak when the first car crosses the block, the glint of tears in Rick's eye as bids climb, and the haunting question echoing through his mind. Can you rebuild from the ashes of your own choices? We'll trace every twist, from legal skirmishes in Vegas courtrooms to secret negotiations with mystery bidders in New York. We'll reveal the hidden costs of living large in the pawn business and the personal price Rick paid to protect the shop his father built. Tonight, the auction catalog goes live. Veteran car aficionados are already refreshing web pages, strategizing proxies to bid on their dream ride. Comment sections explode with speculation. Who will pay top dollar? Will Rick show up at the auction in person? What personal mementos might he tuck into each car's glove box as a parting gift? And most pressing, can the Pawn King survive the greatest sale of his life? The showroom lights buzzed to life as the first batch of classic cars rolled onto the auction block. Gleaming chrome fenders, perfectly sculpted fins, engines purring like tamed beasts. Rick Harrison stood to one side, arms crossed, heart thumping in rhythm with pounding gavel. The crowd was a mix of hardened collectors, suit-clad investors, and eager rookies clutching bid paddles like lifelines. Behind them, cameras circled, capturing every flicker of emotion on Rick's face. He forced a polite nod at attendees but refused to let his gaze stray too long. This was business, he reminded himself. No room for sentiment. Lot 1 was the cherry red 1969 Camaro Z28, the very car he drove home on the night his Pawn Stars pilot aired. The starting bid was set at $50,000. A hush fell. The auctioneer raised his gavel, delivered the opening salvo. Paddle 23 shot up. Paddle 42 followed. By the time the hammer fell, the Camaro had sold for $82,000. A respectable sum, but well below Rick's private valuation. He nodded dutifully, shook the buyer's hand, then slipped backstage to catch his breath. Each sale felt like ripping pages from his personal journal. Lot 2 was the patina-perfect 1955 Chevy Bel Air. Its original two-tone paint dulled just enough to signal authenticity instead of artificial restoration. Bidders circled like sharks smelling blood. The price soared past $80,000. Rick watched television monitors tucked behind the podium, where his own expression flickered, half pride, half grief. He wondered, would the Bel Air's new owner appreciate midnight cruises like he did, or would it become another trophy locked away from open roads? Meanwhile, back inside the shop, Corey Harrison manned the phones, fielding last-minute inquiries from international bidders. He was caught between admiration for his father's collection and fear for the shop's future. "Dad, we're down nearly half the fleet," Corey murmured during a commercial break. Rick forced a tight smile. "We recoup, we rebuild," he replied. It sounded truer to television viewers than to his own ears. He turned, leaned against a display case lined with antique scales, and stared at his reflection. The reflection wore a tuxedo jacket over a neatly pressed shirt, far fancier than his usual polo and jeans. Tonight, he was the ringmaster of his own undoing. Lot 3 was a rare 1970 Dodge Charger R/T, black as midnight with a matte finish and devilish rumble. Whispers spread through the crowd. This was the car Rick least wanted to sell. He remembered buying it with his brother in high school, the two of them taking midnight drives down desolate highways, windows down, music blasting. He'd once called it the closest thing I had to flying. The bidding opened at $100,000. 2 paddles, then 4, then 6. He lost count as the price leapt skyward. When the final bid registered at $175,000, he exhaled as if released from a chokehold. The new owner, arms wedged between shoulders, raised his paddle high and looked triumphantly back at Rick. The crowd applauded. Rick forced a polite grin and raised a hand in acknowledgement, performing gratitude like it was his last remaining skill. In the back room, Chumlee nervously refreshed streaming logs on his tablet, amazed at online bids spiking from Hong Kong and London. "Unreal, man," he muttered. Rick ambled over. "Beats another dusty artifact sitting on a shelf," he said. Chumlee nodded, but his grin faltered. He remembered Rick's 2 decades of collecting. Deals struck at dusty salvage yards, blind auctions where he gambled thousands on a hunch. "Yeah, but man, you love these," Chumlee said softly. Rick's gaze lingered on the Charger's rear tire glistening under floodlights. "Yeah, I did," he admitted. Sales continued. A 1963 Corvette split-window coupe drew fierce competition, ultimately fetching $210,000. A 1968 Shelby GT 500 sprinted to $320,000. Each gavel slam echoed like a drumbeat in Rick's chest. With every departure, his garage bays emptied, leaving only the ghosts of memories. He felt weightless, untethered, as though his past were evaporating into the neon-splattered night. Around midnight, the auction took an intermission. Attendees mingled, sipping champagne from plastic flutes. Rick retreated to a private tent just off the showroom floor, where a small table held his remaining inventory list and projected totals. His accountant hovered nearby, nervously tapping a spreadsheet on a laptop. "At this rate, you'll clear $2 million before sunrise," she whispered. Rick nodded but refused to smile. $2 million could cover the lien, pay off creditors, and leave a cushion, but at what cost? The glow of victory felt hollow. He clasped his hands, remembering his mother's counsel. Money can buy comfort, but it can't buy back time. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with a text, the name, Elena, flashing. His wife had slipped backstage moments earlier, watching in silence. The message read, "Remember why you started. I'm proud of you." In that moment, the room shifted. Walls lined with auction posters and car brochures melted into insignificance. He wasn't just liquidating assets. He was choosing survival for his family, preserving an empire that meant more than any museum piece car. He tapped a quick reply, "Love you." One more round. Recharged by purpose, Rick reemerged onto the showroom floor. He clapped along with the crowd as the next lot rolled in. A rare Ferrari Dino 246 GTS, imported in a limited batch of only 1,700 worldwide. The starting bid, $400,000. Gasps echoed. Bids climbed in five-figure increments. He watched the paddles rise. 1, 2, 3, then fall. $2 million offers arrived via proxy from an art collector in Dubai. The room stilled at the possibility. When the hammer finally fell at $2.3 million, a collective gasp resonated. The buyer, represented by a suited dealer, waved a check. The roar from the crowd was deafening, equal parts envy and admiration. Rick tipped his head, acknowledging the spectacle. With that final sale, the last vehicle under his personal ownership vanished. The stage lights dimmed. Rick stood alone on the glossy floor, the echo of auctions past still ringing in his ears. He inhaled deeply, letting the triumph and the sorrow swirl together into a potent mixture. He knew the road ahead would be difficult. Payments to be negotiated, reputations to be rebuilt, passions to be rekindled. But as he gazed at the empty bays beyond the glass walls, he also felt a surprising surge of freedom. He had proven one thing tonight. That, for better or worse, Rick Harrison's legacy was defined not by cars or collections, but by the tenacity to drive forward, no matter the terrain. After the lights dimmed and the echo in the showroom settled, Rick stepped through the sliding doors into the crisp Las Vegas night. The desert AIC hadn't quite chilled the air enough, and he rubbed his arms as though steeling himself against something more than the humidity. Corey met him outside, leaning against the storefront's neon sign, its pastel pink glow pulsing in the darkness. The father and son exchanged a glance that spoke volumes, relief mixed with uncertainty. Inside the pawn shop's back office, Chumlee and Rick's daughter Savannah pored over spreadsheets, tallying the night's haul against bills and legal fees. Each cell on the screen represented a debt forgiven or a deadline extended. They knew restoration would be measured in months, not days. Straightening up a stack of maintenance invoices, Savannah looked at her uncle and offered a simple plan. Host a live streaming event with exclusive behind-the-scenes tours, VIP encounters, and donation tiers for devoted fans. Corey countered with a branded merchandise idea, selling custom toy cars modeled after legendary vehicles that had just left the lot. Rick listened, fingers tapping on the desk, absorbing every suggestion. Even though the family's finances hung in the balance, a spark of optimism flashed in his eyes. He also scheduled meetings with longtime creditors. At Primo's Insurance, Rick argued for waiving late fees, citing unpredictable market swings that even seasoned dealers couldn't have foreseen. The insurance agent leaned back, hands steepled, before granting a 3-month grace period in exchange for updated coverage policies. At Capital Trust Bank, he proposed a temporary line of credit, offering additional collateral from his other businesses. The loan officer studied his impeccable track record and agreed to renegotiate the interest rate. One by one, Rick tackled each obstacle with the same tenacity he used when examining antique revolvers or rare coins in his shop. In parallel, the shop rolled out an online auction platform. For the first time, customers around the globe could browse authenticated Pawn Stars items, from historical documents to unique memorabilia. Rick hosted a debut livestream, walking viewers through storerooms typically off-limits even to VIP guests. He revealed hilarious anecdotes. The time a scorpion-laden Mesoamerican jar nearly sent Chumli to the ER, or when a genuine Houdini water torture cell was mistakenly delivered to a private client. Fans tuned in by the tens of thousands, bidding feverishly on items under lifetime pressure. Within days, the new revenue stream generated nearly $500,000, enough to cover immediate debts. Meanwhile, employees rallied behind their patriarch. Justin, the shop manager, organized a fundraising car show on Fremont Street, recruiting local businesses to sponsor booths and vintage car clubs to display their rides in solidarity. Fans met Rick behind velvet ropes, offering heartfelt support and sharing stories of how Pawn Stars had inspired them to chase their own dreams. Banners reading, "We Stand with Rick," fluttered in the neon breeze. The event raised additional tens of thousands, but more importantly, reminded everyone that community isn't a transaction, it's a bond forged in adversity. By midweek, dim anticipation transformed into cautious optimism. The lien was lifted, albeit with stringent covenants that required Rick to rein in non-essential spending and to maintain a lean staff. He embraced the discipline, trading elaborate business dinners for simple meetups at the same diner where the Pawn Stars journey had begun. Over cups of diner coffee, Rick, Corey, and Savannah sketched growth plans on napkins, expanding the shop's appraisal services, launching a custom restoration division, and hosting interactive history seminars. Each idea breathed fresh purpose into the shop's DNA. As autumn descended, the heartbeat of Las Vegas felt different to Rick. The casinos blinked their neon eyes less menacingly now, the strip's roar softened by his renewed sense of agency. He still walked the shop floor each morning in dress shoes, yet wore a tool belt by afternoon as he oversaw minor restorations. He held court at dawn, grilling his team on negotiation tactics and appraisal pitfalls. At dusk, he drove a rental classic through downtown, testing paint finishes and engine purrs as though auditioning prospects for his next personal collection. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. Every venture, like every car, needed careful evaluation before taking on the open road. He often paused to admire the rows of empty bays, imagining them filled with custom builds and barn-find projects yet to arrive. Each unoccupied stall represented promise, a clean slate to pursue new passions and learn from past mistakes. When the neon Pawn Stars sign flickered in the darkness, he remembered both the roar of hammer strikes and the soft hum of engines warmed for testing. In those moments, he felt reborn. Winter settled over Las Vegas like a velvet cloak, but inside the Pawn Stars shop, business hummed with renewed energy. Rick arrived early one Monday, slipping past locked display cases that now brimmed with new treasures, vintage guitars, signed sports memorabilia, rare coins discovered in dusty farm auctions. He pressed his palm against the cool glass of a recently restored 1948 Harley-Davidson, its chrome coils gleaming in the fluorescent light. He remembered the roar of its engine when he first test-rode it, the wind whipping through his hair as he felt a freedom more intoxicating than any high-stakes deal. Now, that spirit fueled the shop's resurgence, proof that rebirth can follow near collapse. In the back office, Corey updated the digital inventory, tagging items for an upcoming Pawn Stars Collectors Week livestream festival. Each day, they would spotlight a category. Comic books one morning, antique firearms the next, and on the final day, a celebratory reunion. Rick, Corey, Chumli, and Savannah would host a Q&A for loyal viewers. Savannah animatedly sketched out the set design on a whiteboard. Neon signage, vintage lamps, a backdrop of license plates from every U.S. state. She planned interactive polls for fans to vote on which item they wanted appraised in real time. The room crackled with creative energy, a far cry from the tension of those dark weeks spent negotiating liens and selling off prized cars. Meanwhile, Justin and the rest of the staff fine-tuned parking logistics for a weekend car and collectibles expo in partnership with a local classic car club. Rick had insisted on christening the event Wheels and Relics, honoring both his twin passions. The plan: clusters of restored vehicles arrayed under the Fremont Street canopy, flanked by tents hosting rare book sellers, historical reenactment displays, and a meet-and-greet booth where Rick would share stories of memorable haggles. Media outlets picked up on the angle: how the Pawn Stars empire had weathered financial storms by doubling down on community-driven events. Tickets sold out weeks in advance, proving that passion, when authentic, gathers crowds. On Friday afternoon, Rick slipped behind the registration desk for a final systems check. Traders arrived early, pushing red, cord bid paddles, sharing nods of admiration. Fans queued for photo ops beside a restored '67 Mustang, its signature fastback silhouette drawing appreciative gasps. In a corner, Rick's daughter Savannah narrated a live video segment from her phone, interviewing a teenager who had driven overnight from Utah to attend. "It's like Comic-Con for history buffs," the teen beamed, camera ready. Savannah laughed and replied, "Exactly. We're celebrating the thrill of discovery." Across the event floor, Chumli handed out neon wristbands emblazoned with Wheels and Relics, creating a festival vibe that buzzed through the crowd. As dusk fell, the neon lights of Fremont Street bathed the exhibit in electric colors. A hush fell when Rick, wearing a leather bomber jacket instead of his customary polo, took the stage next to the old Harley. He cleared his throat, then spoke without notes. "Thank you for showing up, not just today, but all these years. You helped us rebuild." The audience erupted in applause. He held up a wrench, a symbolic gesture, then went on. "This shop isn't built on possessions. It's built on people. Every coin you bought, every car that rolled through our bays, every live stream you watched, you're part of this story." Voices cheered. Tears glistened on cheeks. In that moment, Rick felt that same rush he once got from a triumphant gavel bang. Only now it was magnified by human connection. Over the weekend, the expo raised significant funds for local charities, a children's literacy program, and a veterans assistance group. Bidders at a charity auction paid steep prices for a Pawn Stars experience, a day traveling with Rick to hunt for hidden treasures across Nevada. Proceeds flowed back into the shop's community initiatives. For Rick, the most valuable outcome wasn't the dollar total. It was the reaffirmation that passion, cultivated with integrity, yields dividends in trust and goodwill that no creditor's ledger can quantify. By the time Monday rolled around, the shop floor felt lighter. Empty bays had been filled with incoming cars for restoration, project vehicles rescued from private collections, deserving of Rick's meticulous touch. He surveyed the lineup: a rusted '57 Ford pickup awaiting bodywork, a '72 Chevelle Scrambler poised for engine rebuild, even a rare 1950 Nash Ambassador in need of upholstery. As mechanics prepped these new arrivals, Rick made rounds, offering detailed instructions: patch that dent with lead, then feather sand before primer. Match the original seafoam green. His voice carried the authority of both businessman and craftsman, a synthesis born of hard lessons learned. That evening, as he closed the shop, Rick stood beneath the flickering Pawn Stars sign. He inhaled the cool air deep into his lungs, feeling a contentment he hadn't known during the uncertainty of the auction. He fingered a small replica car, key hanging from his neck, salvaged from one of the cars he'd sold but later redesigned into a pendant. It symbolized both loss and transformation. With a final glance at the empty street outside, he switched off the sign's neon tubes and walked home, confident that while the shop's greatest treasures were once parked under its marquee, its future depended on forging new memories, not clinging to the old. After the whirlwind of Wheels and Relics, Rick Harrison returned to his office with a renewed sense of possibility. The funds raised at the expo had covered the emergency lien, enhanced community programs, and seeded new creative projects. His team gathered around a rough-hewn conference table scattered with sketches of future events, digital show concepts, and charitable partnerships. Whiteboard markers squeaked as Savannah and Corey mapped out a dozen potential livestream episodes, each celebrating a different facet of pawn shop culture. Chumli leaned back in his chair, scanning fan reaction comments on his tablet, and let out a low whistle. "We're not just back," he said. "We're bigger than ever." Rick smiled, imagining how far they'd come. Building on that momentum, Rick approved a pilot for a weekly web series called Backroom Breakdown. Each episode would feature unfiltered conversations with customers who brought in oddities, behind-the-scenes tours of appraisal sessions, and live Q&A segments. The production budget was lean, using shop staff as both crew and cast, but the authenticity shone through high-end polish. Videos premiered on the Pawn Stars YouTube channel and a dedicated site, reaching hundreds of thousands of subscribers within days. Advertising revenue, sponsorships, and viewer donations quickly covered production costs. Perhaps most importantly, the series reignited public fascination with the pawn process as a living, breathing craft rather than a vestige of reality television's past. Meanwhile, Rick dedicated himself to philanthropy, channeling the shop's revived energy into charitable programs. He partnered with local job training nonprofits, offering appraisal internships to underemployed adults. Participants learned to research, negotiate, and restore vintage items while receiving stipends and mentorship. A separate initiative provided free safety workshops for senior citizens on evaluating doorstep vignettes and avoiding scams. The drive to protect vulnerable neighbors reminded Rick of his own mother's hard-working sacrifice and his family's struggles after moving to Las Vegas decades ago. By helping others develop practical skills, he reinforced a deeper mission. Pawn shops could empower communities, not exploit them. On the personal front, Rick found new balance between his business pursuits and family life. Early mornings became ritual meetings over strong coffee with his wife, Elena, who offered tireless support and often handled heart-to-heart phone calls with worried creditors. Weekends were reserved for Jake's baseball games and Savannah's school performances. He even joined a community choir, surprising both colleagues and fans with his tenor voice during holiday concerts. Through it all, he embraced the idea that a fulfilling life encompasses more than profit margins. It requires nurturing relationships and savoring small victories. By modeling that equilibrium, he set an example not only for his children, but for every entrepreneur who thought success demanded endless hustle without rest. Looking ahead, Rick formulated a bold 5-year vision. He planned a network of mobile appraisal units that could deploy to rural communities, bringing expertise directly to front porches. He envisioned an annual Pawn Stars Heritage Rally, where classic cars toured main streets across America, raising funds for vocational education in underfunded areas. The digital show would expand into a streaming platform dedicated to craftsmanship stories, from clockmakers in Wisconsin to blacksmiths in Alabama. Merchandise profits would fund scholarships for aspiring historians and tradespeople. Rick also sought to mentor emerging small business owners, hosting quarterly workshops on sustainable entrepreneurship. Every initiative would align with his guiding principle: commerce can serve compassion. By embedding social responsibility into profit strategies, he aimed to transform the pawn industry's public image. He sketched out expansion plans for international pop-up shops, where collectors craved Americana artifacts. He also secured partnerships with design schools, offering student apprenticeships in restoration and appraisal techniques. Every new connection strengthened the shop's foundation, proving that a pawn business could serve as a cultural crossroads rather than just a transaction hub and community growth. Years passed, and the glow of that auction block became a legend in its own right, a cautionary tale that reverberated through every gearhead forum and every reality TV podcast. Rick Harrison had survived the ultimate risk, the choice to dismantle his own dream to salvage a greater purpose. And in doing so, he redefined what it meant to own a legacy. Today, the Pawn Stars shop stands not merely as a repository of collectibles, but as a living museum of transformation. Empty car bays have yielded to bustling workshops, where rusted chassis hum back to life under the hands of apprentice craftsmen. The echoes of gavel strikes have shifted to the hum of electric welders, and the fans who once clamored for celebrity have chosen to invest in a story of community. Though he still treasures the memories of shining paint jobs and midnight street roars, Rick has embraced an even deeper passion: the faces behind the objects. He has visited rural towns to teach appraisal clinics, launching History on Wheels, a traveling exhibit featuring restored vehicles accompanied by stories from local veterans and displaced families. When a battered 1952 pickup truck rolled into his shop last summer, he didn't just negotiate price. He listened to its owner, a retired miner whose life had been measured in shifts underground and dusty forms waiting for paycheck day. Rick learned that the rust carried the fingerprint of time, that the dents reflected resilience rather than imperfection. Financial records tell one story: revenues climbing steadily, new advisory branches opening in 3 additional states, digital platforms boasting millions of visits per month. But the real triumph is measured in intangible milestones: the number of internships offered to underemployed youth, the count of restored heirlooms returned to grateful descendants, the families reunited by a single piece of history rediscovered in a forgotten barn. Behind every sale, behind every restored fender, lies a human narrative that no ledger can capture. This is the final horsepower in Rick Harrison's engine, the drive to connect humanity through shared heritage. Recently, an unexpected twist reminded Rick of the power of FOMO in reverse. A documentary titled Wheels of Fortune premiered at an international film festival, chronicling the moment he risked everything to auction his cars. Rather than igniting pity, the film sparked admiration and inspired viewers worldwide. It sold out theaters in Tokyo and Berlin, leading universities to invite Rick to speak on the ethics of entrepreneurship. He stood before skeptical scholars and starry-eyed students alike, recounting how a gavel's echo taught him resilience and how a bankrupt garage taught him gratitude. That was more than 5 years ago. Now, at the cusp of a new decade, Rick prepares for an anniversary event that unites every chapter of his journey. He will stage a commemorative auction, this time to celebrate survivors rather than assets. All proceeds will fund a foundation dedicated to teaching financial literacy and creative restoration skills to marginalized communities. No prized vehicle will be sold. Instead, ceramic replicas of legendary cars, handcrafted by program graduates, will find new homes. It's a poignant full circle, from offloading real cars under duress to distributing miniature emblems of hope by choice. When the auctioneer's hammer falls, it will strike not loss, but transformation. In quieter moments, Rick reflects on the calculus of value. He once believed that a high-dollar sale proved worth, that the roar of an engine conveyed status. Now he measures worth in moments saved from obscurity, in histories preserved rather than sold, in hands guided toward meaningful skills. When he helps a single parent secure a stable job by teaching appraisal techniques, he knows the return on investment far surpasses any gavel's final bid. That knowledge hums beneath every negotiation, adding an ethical overtone to every transaction. His children have also inherited his evolved ethos. Corey now leads an international division with an emphasis on ethical sourcing. Savannah developed a scholarship program for design students to upcycle decommissioned vehicles. Chumley launched a podcast exploring objects that changed lives, featuring heartfelt listener stories. In their own ways, each has carried forward the lesson their father learned that auction night: that the most valuable possessions aren't things, but the lives they touch. Together, they form a family tapestry, woven from engines and empathy, chrome and compassion. As twilight settles over the Pawn Stars shop, Rick stands at the main entrance and gazes at the sign he once feared would dim. It now glows brighter than ever, not as a beacon of treasure, but as a lighthouse guiding those who seek both knowledge and kindness. He inhales the desert air, tempered by the hum of restoration workshops nearby. The road ahead remains uncharted, but he knows that at every crossroads, he will choose the lane where purpose flows fastest. The cars parked behind his shop may have sold to distant collectors, but the journey they sparked lives on in every restored fender and every grateful tear. Ultimately, the story of Rick Harrison transcends the roar of an auction block. It tells us that success lies not in clinging to prized possessions, but in transforming them into opportunities for growth. It reminds us, too, that FOMO need not drive us toward possessions, but can inspire us to seize moments, to auction off ego in favor of empathy, to trade in fear for service. And as he closes the doors each night, he salutes that truth, knowing that the greatest chapter of his life is still unfolding, one restored detail at a time.